Hello. The sculptors who created the statues of ancient Greece were treated with disdain by some of their contemporaries who saw the menial task of chipping images out of stone as a low form of drudgery. Writing in the 1st century AD, the Roman writer Seneca looked at their work and said, "One venerates the divine images, one may pray and sacrifice to them, yet one despises the sculptors who made them." On the other hand, the Romans revered Virgil. Since antiquity, some artists have attempted to throw off the slur, as they saw it, of manual labour and present themselves as gifted intellectuals on a higher level than mere artisans or craftsmen. Michelangelo said, "I was never the kind of painter or sculptor who kept a shop." Mozart famously bridled at his lowly status in the house of his patron. He ate with the footman. But by the Romantic period, Wordsworth claimed that poets were endowed with a greater knowledge of human nature and a more comprehensive soul than are supposed to be common in mankind. How did the artist develop the claim to be a special kind of human being? What role did aristocratic patronage of the arts play in changing the status of the artist, and how have we constructed our image of the artist? With me to discuss the state of the artist is Emma Barker, lecturer in art history at the Open University, Thomas Healy, professor of Renaissance Studies at Birkbeck, University of London, and Tim Blanning, professor of modern European history at the University of Cambridge and author of The Culture of Power and the Power of Culture. Tim Blanning, Plato famously wanted to throw poets out of the Republic. Is this because he saw them as subversive to the state?
He certainly did see them as subversive to the state, but I think Plato's problem was that, like many intellectuals, he greatly exaggerated the influence that intellectuals exert on their fellow citizens. And that's one of the reasons why he wanted to get rid of the competition, as it were. The second reason is that he believed that the soul of the human psyche was almost infinitely malleable, and consequently those who had an input into, as it were, moulding that soul had to be very strictly controlled. But I suppose most fundamentally, Plato believed that there were certain forms, ideal forms, which existed out of time and space and were perfect, and consequently all that we could ever approach was some kind of dim shadow on the side of the cave, some dim representation of that. So if you allowed an artist to create an image of a perfect form, we were already at one remove. So it's a representation of a representation. So they could be certainly subversive and disturbing people. But there may also be a psychological problem here. Plato famously said that poetry and philosophy are always hostile to each other, but he was a bit of a poet himself, and I think he may have been worried that there was a poet inside him somewhere that needed to be driven out.
But there seems at the time to have been a parallel body of opinion, which we can't necessarily pin on one person as easily as we can that on Plato, because artists, particularly playwrights, they did have a public role in Greek society. For instance, they were facilitators of public debate, and there was these great Greek festivals at which they appeared, for which they wrote their plays, the plays that we still perform now. So how did that run alongside Plato's condemnation and expulsion?
I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive, in that there's clearly a hierarchy of genre. The Greeks esteemed drama and music very highly, but representational visual arts are much less so. And at the great dramatic festivals, where all the arts were involved, the named dramatists of whom who've come down to us, of whom we have heard, did enjoy high status. Sophocles, for example, clearly did. He was a man of high birth and high status. So I think it depends in large measure on which particular branch of the arts we're looking at.
Thomas Healy, artists such as Pygmalion begin to appear in Greek myths. How much does Greek mythology tell us about Greeks' attitude to art? Is still rummaging around that same area?
Enormously, I think. One of the things that mythology shows us is that there isn't one single view, and I think we can pick up three myths that would really give a good exemplary range of the way that the Greeks thought about art. The first would be Orpheus, the great original poet, and I think coming back to the point that the artist was not seen to somehow dirty his hands, Orpheus plays this music and builds cities. The stones fly into place. He's not actually having to lift or get the labourers to do it at all. And he is divinely inspired. He's seen as a civilizing force. So the artist as, in a sense, the civilizing force is one thing that the mythology picks up on very, very strongly.